Hi, economic students. All right, I'm not sure how long I'll be out, but we're going to still continue on. We need to get through chapter 8. We're going to talk about the law of supply today. We talked about the law of demand and diminishing return, utility diminishing returns, and how it connects. Now we're going to get on the other side of it. So we're going to talk about the producer side of it. But here's our journal for today. So make sure you pause, write this down. Hopefully it's written on the board. If not, it's right here. So what market would it be good to invest in during the pandemic and why? So make sure you continue working on your stock market projects. Those are due the 1st of December. So, pay attention to that. We'll see how the market responds to the current election. Make sure you've been following one of those stocks. You can tell me why you invested in it, why you either sold it or kept it, and so forth. You only have to do one stock though, but remember you're supposed to be doing a lot of trading and looking, and I can tell if you're doing that. All right, moving on. So the law of supply and the supply curve. So your definition of supply is how much of a good or service a producer, a business is willing and able to make for sale to a consumer. So remember, willing is a big part of that. If they're not going to make a profit or a profit incentive, which is the ability to earn something, they're not going to produce the good. Regardless of how much you as a consumer enjoy it, the producer will not provide it if there's not a profit incentive. So the law states that when the price of a good or service rises, so remember the definitions on the board, the arrows, the producer, the business will want to make or produce more of the good. So the law of supply says when the price goes up, quantity goes up. When the price goes down, quantity goes down. And what does that mean? So when the price goes up, think about it as a producer, not as a consumer. If the house market right now is going up and they can earn more money by building a house, quantity is going to go up because more sellers are going to jump into the market. As you learn, consumers demand products and services at the lowest possible price. In contrast, suppliers like Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, right? He's the richest man in the world, exists to make a profit, hopefully a big profit. As you read this section, you'll learn about the law of supply and how it is geared toward making profits.
I sell people delicious donuts. This makes me a supplier of donuts.
Hi there. My name is Sam. I started my own business last year. I sell people used books. This makes me a supplier of books.
Well, hey there. My name is Cornelius, and this is Clothes by Cornelius, my store. I sell people clothing. This makes me a supplier of clothes.
You just met 3 suppliers. Ashley, who supplies donuts. Sam, who supplies books. And Cornelius, who sells clothing. Suppliers are the people who sell us goods and services. Suppliers supply us with goods and services because they want to make money. The more money suppliers can make, the more they will supply. This is called the profit motive.
When I can sell donuts for a high price, I will supply many donuts because I can make larger profits. As a supplier, I am all about them profits.
When the price of books goes up, I will supply more books because I can make more money. As a supplier, I am all about the profits.
If the price of clothing goes up, I will supply more clothes because I can make more moolah. I'm all about making more moolah.
So, when the price of a good or service increases, our suppliers, Ashley, Sam, and Cornelius, will supply more goods. They do this because they are motivated by profits. The profit motive incentivizes suppliers to supply goods and services that you, the consumer, wants. Let's hear it for our suppliers for providing us with the goods and services we want and need.
So the profit motive or incentive is a big deal for sellers. Let me get back to where we need to be. To understand how prices are determined, you have to look at both the demand and supply. So this is where we're going to be connecting those because we're going to be graphing on Wednesday and then review on Thursday and test on Monday on your law of supply and demand. We may push it back to Tuesday. We'll see how far we get into it. But for right now, that's kind of the game plan. So today we're going to do section 3 and then tomorrow section 4. So the willingness and ability of a producer to provide goods and services at different prices in the marketplace.
This is our second video of the unit over the law of supply. The first question we need to address is, what is supply? And no, we're not talking about office supplies or your secret supply of guns or zoo animals, because those were an option here. No, the economic definition of supply refers to the amount of goods and services a business is willing to produce and deliver to a particular market. For example, at any given time, there's a certain number of businesses that are willing to produce a certain number of rockets or ice cream cones to deliver to those particular markets. So what factor has the greatest impact on how many rockets or ice cream cones, or any other product for that matter, are produced and provided to those markets? The answer again, and of course, is price. Let's say a rocket in the marketplace goes for about $100,000. How many rockets are going to be produced and provided to this market at this price? The answer is maybe not so many, because rockets are really expensive to build and there wouldn't be a whole lot of profit there. Now let's say because of that last low price, a lot of people want the rockets, and so that demand pushes the price up to $250,000. Will businesses produce more or fewer rockets to be provided to this market? The answer is more, because at these higher prices, more businesses will find it profitable to produce and deliver rockets to the market. For another example, let's look at the market for ice cream cones. If the market determines the price is $4, businesses are going to rush to produce more ice cream cones because that's an astronomical price for an ice cream cone, and profits will be high. However, the consumer is going to respond by buying fewer ice cream cones, and so the price drops to $2. Will businesses produce more or fewer ice cream cones to deliver to the market? The answer is fewer, because businesses will have fewer profits for the production of ice cream cones. And so they'll get out of the market. This is the law of supply that states that when prices rise, the quantity supplied will go up because profits will be high. And as prices fall, the quantity supplied will go down because profits will go down. Now let's take a look at this in graphical format. On the y-axis, we have the price of pizza, and on the x-axis, we have the quantity of pizza. We see as the price of pizza rises, the quantity supplied of pizza goes up as well. In other words, an upward sloping supply curve represents the law of supply. Now let's dig in a little deeper into this same graph. Let's say the price of pizza starts at 50 cents a slice. We dash that over and dash it down, and we can see that we supply 2 slices of pizza at that price. But for whatever reason, let's say the price goes up to $1.50. With this high price, businesses are going to produce more. So if we dash over from $1.50 until we intersect with the supply curve and dash down, we can see that we now produce and supply 8 slices of pizza to the pizza market. That's the law of supply. In our next video, we'll look at the interaction between supply and demand curves and how that determines price. But for now, we'll leave it at that. Thank you for your attention. You want to go?
So the law of supply states, and you've already written this down, so don't worry about writing it again, but let's just review. As the price for goods go up, the quantity supplied rises also. As the price falls, the quantity also falls. So you've written this down. According to how it works, if the price is up, more profit. If the price goes down, less profit and less supply. You may recall with demand, price and quantity demanded move in opposite directions. With supply, a direct relationship between the price and quantity supplied. So it's the same definition that you've already written down for the law of supply. A direct relationship means that when price rises, quantity supplied will rise too. When price falls, quantity supplied by sellers will also fall. Thus, the larger quantity will generally be supplied at higher prices than at lower prices. I think we're going to skip this Khan Academy. Maybe I'll add it at the end, but we need to go through and finish talking about the law of supply. So the profit incentive, so you have to have a profit incentive for a producer to produce a product or a service. If it's not there, then they're not going to do it because they're doing something essentially for free or paying to work. So there has to be a profit incentive, and one of the factors that motivate people in a market economy. And we have capitalism in our economy. So the higher price not only returns higher profits, but also must cover additional costs of producing more. So when you're making, let's say, a home, for example, it's going to cost more. And sometimes when, like for right now, the housing market is pretty high and you can sell up, but you also have the problem with the materials. So the materials are going up because there's such a demand for homes that they can't get all those materials. So there's quite the conundrum with the housing market. So why does a business producer want to increase supply when the price of good increases? For profit. Profit is an incentive to supply more. As the price of goods increases, there's more potential for business to earn higher profits. Business will also figure ways to increase supply to make it more efficient and more of a profit. Why does a business producer want to decrease supply when the price of a good decreases? A lack of incentive or a lack of no profit. Lower price for good equals a less profit or maybe a loss. And you don't want a loss in a business because you're going to end up having to close your doors. Suppose you own a company that produces skateboards. Imagine that the price you charge for the skateboards covers all these costs and gives you a small profit. Under what circumstances would you be willing to produce more skateboards? Think about it. What would you? To take an expense of expanding production, you would have to be able to charge a higher price for your skateboards. At a higher price per skateboard, you would be willing to supply, that is, produce and sell more than you would at a current lower price. Even though skateboards will cost more to produce because of overtime payments to workers, additional machines, more repairs on machines, and so on, you could afford to pay the additional cost of increasing the quantity sold. And you would increase in profit. So therefore, you would want to do that. You would want to increase. This fact is the base of the law of supply. So as a law of demand, special tables and graphs are shown in the law of supply. Using an example, we're not going to do the CDs, but I'm going to show you this video. And this
demand curve down, let's move on to the supply curve.
A supply curve shows how much of a good suppliers are willing and able to supply at different prices. As with the demand curve, there's a supply curve for every good and service. And again, the ideas are the same, so let's look at the supply curve for oil. We see an intuitive relationship between price and the quantity supplied. As the price goes up, the quantity of oil that companies are willing to supply increases. In this example, at a low price, $5 per barrel, let's say 10 million barrels of oil are supplied per day. At $20 per barrel, 25 million barrels are supplied. And at 55 per barrel, 50 million barrels are supplied. So in general, a higher price means a greater quantity supplied. Let's delve deeper and see why. Oil exists all over the world, but it's not equally easy to extract. In some places, like Saudi Arabia, it's really easy to get oil out of the ground. It costs about $2 a barrel to extract. Oil in the US, like from Alaska, is a lot deeper, and getting it out costs more, at least $10 per barrel. And producing oil from an oil rig like the Atlantis rig in the Gulf Coast is even more expensive. That rig has to descend more than a mile underwater before drilling even begins. When oil prices are relatively low, the only suppliers that can turn a profit are those who can get to the oil cheaply, like Saudi Arabia. As the price goes up, other suppliers in Nigeria, Russia, and Alaska who have higher extraction costs start to become profitable, so they can enter the market. As the price gets higher, even the most expensive extraction techniques become profitable. The supply curve slopes upward because the only way the quantity of oil can be increased is to exploit higher and higher cost sources of oil. As the price of oil goes up, the depth of the oil wells goes down. With this simple line, the supply curve summarizes the way suppliers respond to a change in price. including how suppliers will enter and exit the market depending on the price. So far, we've said things like, if the price goes down, buyers will want to buy more, or if the price rises, suppliers will want to sell more. But we haven't said anything about how prices are determined. That's the subject for the next video, equilibrium.
So the equilibrium is when you looked on that graph, is where the two will meet, where demand and curve meets. So let's skip over to, here is what they call a supply schedule. This is a supply, and this is the graph right here. You can see that they're, for each output, or how much the price is going to be, what is its quantity going to be. So this is talking about iPads, the market for iPads. Where in the world did it go? Hold on, let me go back. There we go. So you can see as they plot it out, and then we're going to talk about demand. So at some point, there's going to be an equilibrium and probably cross the $600 mark where the demand will say, yeah, we'll have 5 people would be willing to pay $1,000 for it. Maybe 7 people would be willing to pay $800 for it, but you're going to have a better market around $500 or $600, and that's where the equilibrium is, where you're going to be able to sell the most, and both of you are going to gain something from it. So the supply curve, and this will be on your test, this question, what does the supply curve look like? It slopes upward from left to right. So from left to right. All right, oops, left to right, wrong way. All right, here we go, Mr. Clifford.
Machines would cause these supply.
Oh.
Paul, this is just stupid. Why are we doing this? I look more like a cowboy than I do a dairy.
So I think we've seen this, but I want to just go over a little bit.
Cowboy, the way we know him, should be called a horse boy. And Dallas Horse Boys has a pretty nice ring to it. Now, if there's one thing I know about, it's dairy farming. Just joking, I don't know anything about dairy farming. But I do know about supply and the law of supply. The law of supply says there's a direct relationship between price and the quantity supply. When the price increases for milk, that's going to increase the quantity of milk produced. This is because an increase in the price gives an incentive for dairy farmers to produce more because they want to make more profit. So a supply curve is upward sloping. When the price increases, the quantity of supply increases. And again, when there's a change in price, that moves along the supply curve. But the supply curve can also shift. Just like demand, an increase in supply is always to the right, and a decrease is always to the left. Using milk as our example, let's talk about the 5 shifters of supply. Man, I just filmed this after drinking all that milk. Oh my gosh, that was horrible. Woo, boy.
Yeah, I remember the strange guy.
The price of inputs or resources. So if there was a huge increase in the price of dairy cows, that would cause the supply of milk to decrease. Since you need cows to produce milk, an increase in the price of that key resource means we'd be producing less milk. The second shifter is number of producers. So if out of nowhere there's an increase in the number of dairy farmers, that would increase the supply of milk. The third shifter is a change in technology that would affect productivity. So new advanced milking machines would cause the supply for milk to increase and shift to the right. Another shifter is government involvement, such as taxes or subsidies. A subsidy is when the government wants firms to produce more, so they give them money to produce more output. This would cause the supply curve to shift to the right. A tax is just the opposite. This would take away producers' money, and since they don't have money to produce stuff, the supply would shift to the left and decrease. And the fifth and last shifter is future expectations. If a producer thinks they can make more profit on their products a few weeks from now, they'll hold back supply now and then supply more later on. So here's the question for you. What happens to supply when the price increases? Gee, that milk! Nothing. Remember, a change in price only affects quantity supply. The supply is not going to change. Remember, a change in price moves along the supply curve, and a change in something else, one of the 5 shifters, will cause the actual supply curve to change. Well, that, Mr. Clifford, really helps me understand these economic concepts. All right, now we finally have enough information to put supply and demand together. Over here we have the demand schedule and demand curve from the market.
I'm going to show you this part.
The market for milk. Remember, demand goes to the dirt. Right here we have the supply curve for milk that we talked about in this video. And of course, supply goes up to the sky. Now they come together and they set the market equilibrium price and quantity, sometimes called the market clearing price and quantity. $3 is the one spot where the quantity demanded exactly equals the quantity supply. Again, that's called equilibrium. But what if we're at disequilibrium? What if the price is way up here at $5? The quantity demand is only going to be 10 gallons, right? When the price goes up, people don't want to buy as much milk. But when price goes up, producers want to produce more milk. And the quantity supplied is going to be right here at 50 gallons of milk. The result is going to be something called a surplus. A surplus is when the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. And how much is the quantity of the surplus? Well, in this case, it's 40 gallons of milk. It's the 50 gallons of milk that were produced minus the 10 gallons that were actually bought. Now, unless there's some sort of government involvement or something else weird happening in this market, a surplus is going to eventually fix itself. If producers were producing all this milk, but no one's buying at that high price, what are the producers going to do? Well, they're going to put all the milk on sale, they're going to lower it down to the equilibrium price. But what if price fell even further than that and it fell down to $1? So at a low price, consumers want to buy 80 gallons of milk. But producers don't want to produce very much, right? They're only going to produce 10 gallons of milk. And this creates a shortage. A shortage is when the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. And how much is the shortage in this situation? Well, it's 70 gallons. The quantity demanded of 80 minus the 10 quantity supplied. And again, unless something weird is happening in this market, the shortage is going to fix itself. Now, up to this point, we've only talked about how a change in price will move along the demand or along the supply curve. The next video is going to talk about the entire demand curve or supply curve shifting, which will change the price and the quantity. Make sure to check out that video and other videos explaining the supply and demand curve, all right? Till next time.
Yeah, he's quite unique, but he does get the point across and tells us what we need to know. All right, so remember, according to the quantity supply, or quantity demand, quantity supply, it only shifts if the determinants are there, or the shifter. So the lines actually physically move up or they move down. If not, if it deals with a quantity supply, it's only going to go along that original supply line. So that's the difference between those two. So each point on the supply curve signifies that a producer will supply a certain quantity at each particular price. If the price increases or decreases, the quantity supplied also increases or decreases. A change in quantity supplied is caused by a change in the price and is shown as a movement along the supply curve. So we know these shifters, and I'm going to leave it here for a second for you to write down if you have not. It's also on my board that's in the corner of the room that you can write down. Those notes are important to have. So cost of production, how much it costs to make something, includes things like natural resources and labor. Remember our 5 factors of production? Those are all play into that. So what is the 5 factors of production? Land, labor, technology, entrepreneurship, and capital. So those are things that will always play into factor with the supply because the producer's dealing with that. He has to pay for it, he has to provide it, and then try to make a profit off of it. And there's got to be an incentive because sometimes the 5 factors of production are difficult and not worth the time and money because remember, time is money. Sometimes, however, producers will supply more goods or fewer goods at every possible price. This is shown as a movement of the entire supply curve and is known as change in supply. A change in price does not cause this movement. What does cause the entire supply curve to shift to the right, increase in supply, or the left, decrease in supply. So how does competition change all this? So competition drives the price down, and it's good for our market because think about it, if there was no competition with I don't know, candy bars, there'd be one candy bar and you were addicted to candy bars. You would pay a lot more for it if there was not the competition to drive the price down because the seller knew that it was in some ways inelastic. The EpiPen, for example, just came out with a competition and has driven the price down. At one point in time, with insurance, it was $400 for us, and now it's been there's competition where we're not paying a half, maybe a quarter of that. So competition is healthy for our market and healthy for consumers too. So more businesses competing to make a good will lead to an increase in supply. So then therefore there's too much, it's going to drive the price down for demand, right? Or not for demand, on the demand side, yeah. So fewer businesses competing to make a good will lead to a decrease in supply. So as a firm enters into the industry, greater quantities are supplied at every price and the supply curve shifts to the right. Consider the number of video rentals. As more video rentals stores pop up, the supply curve for video rentals shifts to the right. And then we have taxes and subsidies. So subsidies is free, not free. We know we don't say free in economics, but money given to an individual that do not have to pay it back. So that'll also help lower the cost of production. And then taxes increases the cost of production because you don't have as much money in your pocket. So that's going to affect the profit incentive. If the government imposes more taxes, businesses will not be able or willing to supply as much as before. If taxes on silk increase, silk businesses would sell fewer quantities at each and every price, and then it would shift to the left. So that would be a determinant. So it would change the whole supply line altogether, supply curve altogether. Now, if it wasn't a determinant, it would just go along the supply line. So remember that when you're graphing. How does technology change supply? So new technology will almost always lower the costs of production, leading to an increase in supply. And then new technology might make things cheaper. Remember we talked about in history during the turn of the 20th century when machinery was starting to come out, combines were doing the equivalent of 3 hours of work for 30 hours of 10 men. So it's going to increase productivity, plus the cost will go down. Although the combine is relatively expensive, it will pay it in its own self by just the increase of technology. And we also can talk about fertilizer, and we can talk about irrigation. All that stuff has increased greatly. All right, what happens when one or more of these factors change supply? It'll shift. So here is the shift that you'll get in this law of supply. If something happens, for example, technology or one of those determinants, the cost to produce it, it's going to change the supply curve, just like the demand curve. Now, if it's just a demand that all of a sudden became something a little bit, more popular or needed at the time, it's just going to go along this line right here. Now, where these two will cross is going to be your equilibrium. Key factors that change supply and shift the supply curve line. So factors are cost of production, taxes, and less competition. Factors that cause an increase in supply, cost of production, subsidies, more competition, and new technology. Here's something, because we talked about the law of diminishing utilities, right? Marginal utilities. Now we're going to talk about the law of diminishing returns. This is something that deals with people working. So one person working may be overwhelmed, and then when you add another one, they can make as equal as twice as much, right? And then you add another one, well, the production value goes down a little bit, and to the point where it no longer is of any value if you have 10 people working, for example.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct.
Hey Econ students, this is Jacob Clifford. Welcome to ACDC Econ. Today we're going to find out what happens when you keep adding more and more workers and the law of diminishing marginal returns. Guys, seriously, we don't all need to be here right now. In this video, we're looking at the relationship between inputs, the resources to produce things, and outputs, the things that producers make. For example, when a pizza company hires more workers, what happens to the number of pizzas they can produce? Before we jump into it, there's a few details we have to cover. First, keep in mind that there's two types of resources, fixed resources and variable resources. Fixed resources are fixed. They don't change as you produce more. Like a pizza oven. If you produce one pizza or 500 pizzas, you still need that one oven. Variable resources do change with the more that you produce. So the more pizzas you make, the more workers, dough, and cheese you need. When it comes to producing things, economists like to differentiate between the short run and the long run. Now, it's not a set amount of time, like 2 weeks. It's more like an idea. A company is in the short run when they have at least one fixed resource. So today, right now, a pizza restaurant is in the short run because they only have one oven. The long run is more about what could potentially happen in the future. So in the long run, all resources are variable. So what if the company had 2 ovens, or 3 ovens, or 10 ovens? The long run also has the idea of economies of scale, which I'll cover in a different video. So in this video, I'm going to talk about production in the short run when there's at least one fixed resource. Okay, here we go. When you hire no workers, you get no output. But when you hire one worker, they have to do everything on their own. They can't specialize. 2 workers can split up the work and produce a whole lot more together than any one of them could on their own. This shows the benefits of specialization, right? 2 heads are better than 1. In this case, 2 hands are better than 1. But specialization has its limits. As you add more and more variable resources, eventually you're going to get less and less additional output. This is the idea of one of the most important concepts in economics, the law of diminishing marginal returns. As you continue to add variable resources to fixed resources, the additional output will eventually decrease. Notice that I said that it will eventually decrease. It can't increase because of specialization, but you keep hiring more and more workers, eventually you get less and less output. Here's some made-up numbers to help you understand the concept. Right here, this first column is number of inputs, in this case, workers. The second column is the number of output, the pizzas they can produce in 30 minutes. These numbers show the law of diminishing marginal returns, but it's easier to see them by calculating something called the marginal product. That's the additional output generated from hiring one additional worker. Okay, pause the video, see if you can calculate the marginal product on your own. When you're legit, all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day, the first worker can produce 5 pizzas, so the additional output they make is just those 5 pizzas. But when you hire 2 workers, they can produce 15. So the additional output from the second worker is an additional 10 pizzas. This shows the benefits of specialization. 1 worker can produce 5 pizzas on their own, but 2 workers can more than double that output. 3 workers can produce a total of 20 pizzas, but the additional output produced by that 3rd worker is 5 pizzas. And of course, the 4th worker adds an additional 2 pizzas, and the 5th worker adds an additional 0. But now with the 6th worker, the total output actually falls, so the marginal product is negative 4. Now keep in mind, this is not because the workers are lazy or dumb, it's because of fixed resources. Okay, here's the question. With which worker does the law of diminishing marginal returns set in? I want to be in America. I want to be in America. I have to be in America. Now, it's not the 6th worker, it's the 3rd worker. Notice the marginal product has been falling ever since the 3rd worker. That's diminishing returns. It's not when it actually goes negative. That's negative returns, a completely different concept. Actually, there's 3 stages of returns. Right here is stage 1, where the marginal product is increasing because of specialization. Total product is increasing at an increasing rate. Right here is stage 2, because the marginal product is falling because of fixed resources and the law of diminishing marginal returns. Total product is increasing, but at a decreasing rate. Right here is stage 3, and the marginal product is negative, which means the total product is actually falling. This is because the workers are in each other's way, and they're fumbling over each other, and there's just way too many cooks in the kitchen.
Bonus round!
Okay, now hopefully you understand it with all the numbers. Let's take all this information and put it on a graph, right? Economists love graphs. Okay, right here is the total product curve, and right here is the marginal product curve. Now, you should be able to spot the 3 stages of returns by looking at the graph. Right here is stage 1, because total product is increasing at an increasing rate, and the marginal product is going up. Right here is stage 2, because the total product is going up, but at a decreasing rate, and the marginal product is falling. Right here is stage 3, and the total product is falling because the marginal product is negative. It's important to keep in mind that we're talking about economic theory here. The numbers in real life are never as perfect as the textbook. But the idea of diminishing marginal returns is super important for anyone who just wants to run a business and figure out how many workers to hire, to a government official trying to figure out the best economic policy. Think of a farmer fertilizing their land, right? A little bit of fertilizer, that helps. More fertilizer maybe gives you a little more output, but you can't get more and more output from more and more fertilizer. In fact, eventually, the more fertilizer you put, the less output you're going to get. The same idea might apply to the government. A little bit of environmental regulation might help the environment a whole lot, but more and more regulation will eventually do less and less additional benefit to the environment. Anyways, it's important to understand this is just not textbook stuff. This actually can help you make decisions in your life, all right? Thanks for watching. Till next time. Hey, thanks for watching ACDC Econ. If you want to watch the next video about economies of scale, click right here. If you like movies and you like economics, then watch Econ Movies. Click right here. Also, follow me on Twitter at ACDC Leadership. If you have a question, that is hashtag.
So at some point, your employer will have to decide when it is beneficial. All right, so that is it for today. Remember, with the extra time that you have in class, to work on your stock market project, and we will wrap up tomorrow with section 4 of the law of supply and demand. And then on Wednesday, we're going to go over some problems. I'm going to give you a whole worksheet of problems. I'll go over the first one, and maybe Thursday we will give you the review. I might just give it to you anyways, and then continue working on those graphing problems. And then Monday, maybe the review continue, and then Tuesday the test. I think that's what we'll do. All right, well, we'll see you tomorrow.